Ready to get started with AI and the latest technologies? Microsoft Reactor provides events, training, and community resources to help developers, entrepreneurs, and startups build on AI technology. Learn more by visiting aka.ms/InfoQ/Reactor.
Hello and welcome to the InfoQ podcast. My name is Daniel Bryant. I'm the news manager here at InfoQ, and my day job I currently work in platform engineering at Syntasso. Today we have a treat for you as I've managed to assemble several of the InfoQ podcast hosts to review the year in software technology, techniques, and people practices. We'll introduce ourselves in just a moment, and then we'll dive straight into our review of architecture, culture and methods, AI and data engineering, and cloud and DevOps. There is, of course, no surprises that AI features heavily in this discussion, but we have tried to approach this from all angles, and we've provided plenty of other non-AI insights too. Great to see you all again. Let's start with a quick round of intros, shall we? Thomas, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I don't think I've done my full introduction in a while on the podcast. My day job, I'm an application architect at Blackbaud, the #1 software provider for social impact. I do a lot of stuff for InfoQ and this year a lot of stuff for QCon. So I'm lead editor for architecture and design, co-host of the podcast, obviously. And I was a co-chair of QCon San Francisco this year and a track host for QCon London. So that kind of rounds out what I've been up to. Next up, Shane.
Thanks, Thomas. Really great to be here with my colleagues again. Yeah, Shane Hastie, lead editor for Culture and Methods. My day job, they call me the Global Delivery Lead for Skills Development Group. Written a couple of books, deep into the people and culture elements of things. The highlights for this year, unfortunately, I didn't get to any of the QCons. I'm sad about that, and hopefully next year we'll be there in person. But some of the really amazing guests we've had on the Engineering Culture podcast this year have been, we'll talk a bit about it later on, but that's probably been some of my highlights. Srini.
Thanks, Shane. Hello, everyone. I am Srini Penchikala. My day job is I work as an application architect, but for InfoQ and QCon, I serve as the lead editor for data engineering and AI and ML community at InfoQ. I also co-host a podcast in the same space. And I am serving as the programming committee member for QCon London 2025 conference, which I'm really looking forward to. Real quick, 2024 has been a marquee year, right, for AI technologies. And we are starting to see the next phase of AI adoption. We'll talk more about that in the podcast. And also, I hosted a AI ML Trends podcast report back in September. So that will be the biggest reference that I'll be going back to, a few times in this podcast. Definitely, there are a lot to look forward to. I am looking forward to sharing in today's podcast the technologies and trends that we should be hyped about, and also what is all the hype that we should be staying away from. Next, Renato.
Hi, everyone. My name is Renato Losio. I'm an Italian cloud architect living in Germany. For InfoQ, I'm actually working in the Cloud Queue. I'm an editor. And definitely my highlight of the year has to be being the chair of the first edition of the InfoQ Dev Summit in Munich. Back to you, Daniel.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed the Dev Summits. I was lucky enough to go to the InfoQ Dev Summit in Boston, having sort of worked in Boston for a number of years, or worked with a Boston-based company, and the content there was fantastic. Staff Plus, in particular, sticks in my mind. I know we're going to dive into that, but I also did the platform engineering track at QCon London this year, which is fantastic. Great crossing paths with yourself, Srini. I think I've met almost everyone this year, maybe not yourself, Shane, this year. Actually, I can't remember exactly when, but it's always good to meet in person, and the QCons and the Dev Summits are perfect for that kind of stuff. And I always learn a ton of stuff, which we'll give the listeners a hint at tonight, right? Or today as we're recording. So I just want to do a quick look back on last year, because every year we record these podcasts, we always say we want to look back and say, hey, did our predictions come true? And one we pulled out this time for last year, we said 2024 include the use of AI within software delivery becoming more seamless, an increasing divide between organizations and people adopting AI and those that don't, and a shift towards composability and improved abstractions in the continuous delivery space. So I think we actually did pretty well this year, right? I'm definitely seeing a whole lot of AI, as you hinted at, Srini, coming in there. And as you say every year, Thomas, the AI overlords have not stolen our jobs yet. So not completely, right, in terms of software engineering.
Yeah, I think we're all still employed. And I was surprised that quote in there about the separation. I think that's true. Like we're seeing the companies that are doing the innovator, early adopter are still doing new things. I think the companies that are more late majority are like, we want to use it, but they're not quite sure how yet. I don't know if Srini, you have any more insight into how people are adopting AI.
Yeah, that's very true, Thomas. Yep, definitely AI, is here, I guess. But again, it's still evolving, right? So I definitely see some companies are going full-fledged. Some companies are still waiting for it to happen, right? So as they say that the new trend, and I will talk more about this later in the podcast, the agentic AI, right? The AI agents that can not only generate and predict the content and insights, they can also take actions. So the agentic AI is a big deal. So as they say, the AI agents are coming, so whether they will overtake our jobs or not, that's yet to be seen. But speaking of the last year's predictions, we had talked about the shift towards AI adoption, right? The adoption has been a lot more this year, but I think we still have some areas, where I thought we would be farther ahead, we are not, so it's still evolving.
I see lots of large organizations that are not software product companies putting their toes in and bumping against privacy, security, ethics, and not sure how to go forward, knowing that they absolutely need to. And often that governance frame slowing things down as they're exploring, well, okay, what does this really mean for us? And a lot of conservatism in that space.
It's really funny, Shane, compared to what probably Renato and I are seeing, right? So I went to the Google Cloud Summit in London and I only heard AI, right? Like if you listen to the hype, and I think, Renato, you covered a reInvent for us recently. I think if you sort of listen to the hype, you believe everyone, even the more late adopters are covering like AI.
Yeah.
Renato, right?
It's just to give an order of magnitude. I don't know if they changed the number during the conference, but at a conference like reInvent, there were over 800 sessions about AI ML. By comparison, there were just about 200 about architecture and even less about serverless. So that gives a bit the direction where the conference was going. Surprisingly, the conference itself was not so generative AI focused. They tried to make it different. Probably go back to that later on, but I find it interesting what happened in the last year in the space of AI cloud. But I don't take responsibility for the prediction of last year because I was not there. So it's great. But I have to admit that I love to start with looking back at the prediction. Actually, when I see tech prediction for 2025, actually, I tend to go to the bottom of the article or use it as a reference to the article of the year before, because I like actually to see a year later what people actually predicted, if it still does. I love to go back to those topics.
That's awesome, Renato. And you will get the privilege this time of at the end to talk about your predictions, right? So we'll hold you to it next year. So enjoy it for the moment. But I think that's a perfect segue. You mentioned serverless there. Architecture and design is one of our sort of marquee topics. To be fair, all the things we're going to talk about today are marquee topics, but we often look particularly in InfoQ through an architect lens. And Thomas, you used to run the show for us there. I know you've got some bunch of interesting topics you wanted to talk about. I think the first one was around like cell-based architectures, things like that.
Yeah. So this was, I think, something we highlighted in the A&D Trends report back in April, I think it was. And we ended up having an eMag come out of it and had a lot of different topics. Some of those were from various articles or presentations at QCons. And it's just, this happens in architecture that we have these ideas that have been around for a while, but we didn't have the technology to make it easy to implement. And then it becomes easier, and then people start adopting it. So the idea of putting all of the necessary components in one cell, and so you minimize the blast radius, and if one goes down, the next cell isn't affected, and how do you control it and how do you maintain it? Just like any microservices distributed architecture, there's extra complexity involved, but it's becoming easier to manage. And if you need the benefits, then it's worth the trade-offs. You're willing to take on the extra overhead of managing these things. So like I said, that eMag is full of a lot of different insights, different viewpoints. Again, architects always looking at different viewpoints and ways to look at a problem. So I like that it gives a lot of different perspectives.
We've got to name check Rafael there on that one, just quickly. And Rafael did a fantastic job on that.
Yeah, thanks for calling out Rafael. He did fantastic doing that. The other thing that I remember talking about to a few people at QCon London this year, and I think QCon London last year as well, was the green software trends. So fantastic book, just came out. in April. I think the book signing was the release party at QCon London.
Oh, yes, it was. Anne Curry and team. Yeah, fantastic.
Anne Curry, Sarah, and Sarah.
Yeah.
Sarah Bergman and Sarah Hugh were all there together. And they actually credited InfoQ with being the force that made the book happen, because that was how they were able to all get together and collaborate. So that book about building green software, Adrian Cockcroft has talked about this. He's kind of championing it from here's how you do it in the cloud, going back to serverless. Like, he advocates, make things serverless, make them small, only running when you need it. That kind of philosophy, I think we're going to start seeing architects have to start thinking about that more and more. Like, it's going to become more important. The point that I love about, and Sarah had a great presentation on this, is that it just makes more efficient software. It makes better software. It makes more sustainable, more maintainable software. All the other abilities we look for, if you build with a green mindset, you get all those other benefits. So if you just say, oh, we need to make it green, we need to reduce our carbon footprint, and nobody really cares about that. Well, all the other things you do care about, they come along for the ride. So start thinking about it that way. How do you only run your software when you need to? How do you only write the code you need? So there's a lot of ideas in there. And I think we're going to start seeing more of that hopefully in the next year. That's definitely one of my 2025 predictions.
I think you really raised a good point about green software, in the sense that it's seen as well as a proxy to other things like cost, for example, in the cloud. I think if you go to your CFO and you say, we're trying to make our cloud deployment greener, probably you won't care that much. Even if outside the company you might sell that message that you are generating less CO2, reality is often is as well a proxy on cost optimization. When you talk about serverless, run just what you need or whatever, choose regions that are more carbon effective, often are as well the cheapest data center because they are more efficient. So it's kind of an interesting approach to just look it through the lens of green and not just cost or architecture.
Yeah, I know Anne has talked a lot about how one of the only measures we have sometimes is what's our bill? What's the AWS bill that we get, or Azure bill? And if that's the only measure you have, then use it. That's better than nothing. And it is actually still a pretty good proxy. The cloud providers are getting better at saying, here's how that energy is produced. But you have to dig for it. I think we're going to start seeing that become more of a first class. Here's your bill, and then here's the carbon footprint of this because you ran it in this data center, which is in US East and it's running on coal, versus somewhere in Europe that's on nuclear, right? So I think that's going to be interesting to see if we can get to those metrics and people say, oh, we can run this somewhere else because there's a better carbon efficiency and we save a lot of money by doing it.
All of that is important. I agree with you both. The green software and the sustainable computing is a very good time to talk about it in the AI context, because as we all know, the large language models that are the main part of Gen AI, they do require a lot of processing power. So we have to be more conscious about, like how much are we really spending and how much value we are getting, right? So between the value of these solutions and what are we really spending in terms of money and energy resources and the environment, right? So how about you, Shane? What do you think about green?
Green software, ethics and sustainability have been a drum I have wanted and have beaten for the last 3 years. And it's been great to see more and more the ability to have those hard conversations. And they're challenging within organizations where, as software engineers, as the development community, we can actually start to ask for, hey, we want to do it this way. And now, as Thomas so smoothly says, we can actually use money as a good excuse. And that helps, because without showing the measurable benefits, we're going to struggle.
And Srini brought up the AI component. And yes, the AI carbon footprint is enormous. Like, somebody will say it's the next Bitcoin, like it's just spending a lot of money, but hopefully it's producing value. The other aspect I thought was interesting, and this was a presentation at QCon San Francisco, was how GitHub Copilot serves 400 million requests per day. And it got into the details of how you actually have to implement AI solutions. So GitHub Copilot, two things. There's GitHub Copilot Chat. That's where you open a window, you ask a prompt, it responds, right? It's like ChatGPT with code. But GitHub Copilot, the autocomplete, is kind of remarkable because it has to listen for you to stop typing and then suggest the next thing. And so all of the complications that go underneath that I hadn't considered. So they had to create this whole proxy, and it's hanging up HTTP2 requests. And if you just use native things like Nginx, after 100 disconnects, it just drops the connection entirely. And so you've lost it. There's all these low-level details. And I think when we get to see AI become more standard as parts of big software, more companies that have these distributed systems are going to run into some of these problems. Maybe not to GitHub Copilot scale, but there's probably these unintended things that are going to show up in our architecture that we haven't even thought of yet. I think that's going to be real interesting to see how AI creates the next level of architectural challenges.
And also, maybe just to add to that, Thomas, maybe the AI can also solve some of those challenges, right? We talk about AI hallucinations and bias, but can AI also help minimize the environmental hallucinations and the ethical biases, right? So,
said like a true proponent, Srini, the cause of and solution to most of the world's problems, AI, right? I love it.
Yeah, I think we're going to see how are we going to use AI as an architect? Can I use it in my day job? Can it help me design systems? Can it help me solve problems? I use it as the rubber duck. If I don't have someone else that I can get on a call and chat with and discuss a problem, I'll open up a chat GPT and just start a conversation, right? And say, hey, I'm trying to come up with this. What are some of the trade-offs I should consider? I haven't gone so far as to say, solve this problem. The hallucination may be completely invalid, or it may be that out-of-the-box thinking that you just hadn't thought of yet. It's going to sound valid either way. You still have to prove it out and make it work. So I think the other part of being an architect, I talked about using AI to do your job, but I think the architectural process has been a big discussion this year. All of the Staff Plus talks at QCons are always interesting. I think we have good technical feedback, but people I personally love the, how do I do my job? How do I get better at my job? How do I level up? So we've seen some of that in decentralizing decision-making. I talked to Dan Fike and Shauna Martell about that. They gave a presentation. They wrote up an article based on that presentation. And Shane, I can't remember if you talked to them as well, or you talked to somebody else about, how to do a better job. Like, how do you level up your Staff Plus? How do you become a Staff Plus or a principal engineer?
Yeah, I've had a number of people on the podcast this year talking about Staff Plus and growth, both in single track and dual track career paths. The charity majors still going, the pendulum back and forward. When do you make your choices? How do you make your choices? Shameless plug, I had Daniel as a guest talking about people process for great developer experience. Technical excellence, weaving that into the way that we work. So all of these things, leveraging AI, challenging the importance of the human aspect, that critical thinking. And Thomas, you made the point, the hallucination is there. Well, one of the most important human skills is to recognize the hallucination and not go down that path, to utilize the generative AI and other tools at your fingertips most effectively. Platform engineering, the myth still of the 10x engineer, but with great platform engineering, what we do is we make others 10 times better. And there's a lot of the, I want to say, same old people stuff still coming up, because fundamentally the people haven't changed.
It's a good point.
Human beings, we don't evolve as rapidly as software tools. Digging into product mastery, really interesting conversation with Gojko Adzik about observability at the customer level and bringing those customer metrics right to the fore. So yeah, all of the DORA metrics and all of these others still really important. I had a couple of conversations this year where we've spoken about DORA's great, and it is becoming a target in and of itself for many organizations. And that doesn't help if you don't think about all of the people factors that go with it.
There's a law that once you have a named goal, it stops being a useful metric. I'm botching the quote entirely. But it's like once you have that, it was useful to measure these things to know how well you're doing. But then people see it as that's the thing I have to do, as opposed to, no, just get better and we'll observe you getting better.
Goodhart's law, Thomas.
Yep.
Thank you.
And W. Edwards Deming. If you give a manager a numerical target, they will meet it, even if they have to destroy the organization to do so.
You mentioned the DORA metrics. Well, I loved the QCon keynote Lizzie Matusev gave, was talking about the different metrics you can measure for psychological safety and how to measure team success. And that's how you can say, are these teams being productive? And there's different survey tools out there, and there's different ways to collect this data. But I think she focused on, if people feel they're able to speak up and raise issues and have open conversations, that more than anything else makes the team more successful, because then they're able to deal with these challenges. And I think that keynote went over really well with the QCon audience, that people understood, like, oh, I can relate to that. I can make my teams better. You might not be able to use all the new AI stuff, but you can go back and say, here's how I can, try and get my teams to start talking to each other better. Like you said, Shane, the humans haven't evolved that fast. Software
That's a great quote. On that note, Shane, are you seeing more use of other frameworks as well? Because I'm with you. In my platform engineering day job, I see DORA as every C-level person I speak to knows what DORA is. And for better or worse, people are optimizing for DORA. But I'm also seeing SPACE from Nicole Forsgren et al. I'm seeing DevX from the DX folks, a few other things. And I mean, SPACE can be a bit complicated because there's 5 things, the S, the P, the A, the C, and the E. But I think if you pick the right things out of it, you can focus more on the people, to your point, and the productivity and the happiness as well. Right?
Yeah. We could almost go back to the Spotify metrics. The Spotify team culture metrics have been around for a long time, and what I'm seeing is reinventions of those over and over again. And it's fundamentally about, how do we create that psychologically safe environment where we can have challenging conversations with a foundation of trust and respect. And that applies in technical teams, of course, but it applies across teams and across organizations. And the happiness metrics, and there are multiple of those out there as well. Ebbe Coney gave us some good conversations about creating a joyous environment and also protecting mental health. Burnout is endemic in our industry at the moment. And I think it's not just in software engineering, it's across organizations. But mental health and burnout is something we're still not doing a good job at. And we really need to be upping our organizational game in that space.
I think it's been actually a very bad year in that sense as well, with what you mentioned, Shane, about a manager that to reach the goal might destroy a team. Make me think that this year one of the key aspects has been all the return to office mandate, regardless if it's good or not for the company, has been a key element almost of the large company. It became like the new trend.
There's cartoons of people coming into the office and then sitting on Zoom calls because it's real. The return to office mandates, and this is a strong personal opinion, they're almost all have nothing to do with value for the organization, and they're all about really bad managers being scared. And I'm sure I've just made a lot of managers very unhappy.
Hey, people join this podcast for an opinion, Shane. Keep them coming.
So many times come across the Conway's Law and all the different variations of this. I think Ruth Milan is the one who said that if you have an organization that's in conflict, the organization structure and conflict of the architecture, the organization is going to win. And I'm wondering what the return to office mandates, how is that going to affect the architecture? Like I made the quote, I don't think it was last year, the comment about the COVID corollary to Conway's Law, that, the teams that can't work effectively once we all went remote, they weren't able to produce good distributed systems because they couldn't communicate. Well, now we're in that world. Like everyone has adapted to that. I think we're seeing more companies are doing distributed systems, and the teams don't sit next to each other. They have to form their own little bubbles in their virtual groups because they're not sitting at the desk next to each other. If we make people go back to the office, but we don't get the benefits of them having that shared office space, then what is that going to do to the software? I don't know if I have an answer to that, but it seems like it's not going to have a good impact if you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, maybe I can bring a cheesy analogy to this, right? We started this conversation with serverless architecture where you don't need to run the software systems and servers all the time. They can be idle when you don't need them. I think that should apply to us as humans also, right? We need to. I read this quote on LinkedIn this morning. I really like this. It says almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, including you, right? So we as humans, we need to unplug some once in a while, to avoid the burnout. I mean, that's the only way we can be productive when we need to work. If we have to take that break or time off.
Yeah, plus one to that, Srini. Changing subjects a little bit, but Shane, I know you wanted to touch on some of the darker human sides of tech too.
Yes, I will go there. Cybercrime, the use of deepfakes, generative AI. I had Eric O'Neill on, and the episode is titled Spies, Lies, and Cybercrime. And he brings the perspective from an FBI agent, and there are some really interesting applications of technology in that space, and they're very, very scary. Personally, I was caught by a scammer this year, and they were the social engineering. It worked. Fortunately, my bank's fraud detection system is fantastic, and they caught it, and I didn't lose any money, but it was a very, very scary period while we were trying to figure that out. And for me, and in Eric's conversations, it's almost always the social engineering piece that breaks the barrier. Once you've broken the barrier, then the technology comes into play. But he tells a story of a deepfake video in real time that was the chief financial officer of a large global company. So very perturbing, somewhat scary. And from a technical technologist perspective, it's how do we make our systems more robust and more aware. So again, leveraging the AI tools is one of the ways. So the potential for these tools is still huge.
Perfect segue, Srini, into your space. It's slightly scary, but well-founded grounding there, Shane. But yeah, I think it's like it's almost a dual-use technology in terms of like for better or worse, all right? And Srini, I'd love to hear your take on what's going on in your world in the AI space.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Thanks, Shane. That's a really good segue. This is probably a repeat of one of the old quotes, Uncle Ben from Spider-Man movie, right? With power comes responsibility. I know we kind of keep hearing that, but yeah, with powerful AI technologies, have to come the responsible AI technologies, right? So in the AI space, again, there are a lot of things happening. I encourage our listeners to definitely watch the 2024 trends report we published back in September. We go into a lot of these trends in detail. But just to highlight a couple of things in the short time we have in today's podcast, obviously the language models are going at a faster pace than ever. Large language models, it seems like there is no end to them, right? Every day you see a new LLM, popping out, and Hugging Face website, you go there, you see a lot of LLMs available for different use cases. So it's almost like you need an LLM, large language model, to get a handle on these LLMs, right? So, but one thing I am definitely curious about, and also seeing the trend this year, are the what are called small language models. So these are definitely a lot smaller in terms of size and data sets compared to large language models, but they are excellent for a lot of the use cases where, again, talking about green software, you don't want to expend a lot of computing resources, but you can still get similar accuracy and benefits. So these SLMs are getting a lot of attention. Microsoft has something called Phi3, Google Gemma, there is the GPT Mini, I think. So there are a lot of these small language models are definitely adding that extra dimension to the generative AI. And also these language models are enabling the AI modeling and execution on the mobile devices like phones, tablets, and IoT devices. Now you can run these language models on a smaller phone or a tablet or laptop without having to send all the data to the cloud, which could have some data privacy issues, and also obviously the cloud computing resource and cost. Right. So this is one of the trends I'm watching. Definitely keep an eye on this. And the other trend is obviously the one I mentioned earlier, called agentic AI, agent-based AI technologies. Right. So this is where I think we are kind of going to the next level of AI adoption, where we have the traditional AI that's been used for a long time for predicting the results. And then we have Gen AI, which started a few years ago with the GPT and the Chat GPT announcements. So generative AI not only does the prediction, but it also generates the content and insights, right? It goes to the next level. So I think the agents are going to go one more step further, and they can not only generate the content or insights, but also they can act on those insights with or without supervision of humans. So there are a lot of tasks that we can think of that we don't need humans to be in the middle of the process. We can have the agents kind of act on those. And also, one of the interesting use cases I heard recently is a multi-agent workflow application where each of the agents take the output from the previous agent as the input and they kind of perform their own task. But doing so, they're actually also giving the feedback to the previous agent on the hallucinations and the quality of the output. So the previous agent can pick a different model and rerun the task, right? So they go through these iterations to improve the quality of the output, minimize the hallucinations and biases. So these multi-agent workflows are definitely going to be a big thing, next year. So that's one other area that I'm kind of seeing. Also, recently, just a couple of days ago, Google actually announced Google Gemini 2.0. The interesting thing about this article is Google's CEO Sundar Pichai. He actually wrote a note, so he was kind of the co-author of this article. So it was a kind of big deal, from that standpoint. And they talk about how the agentic AI is going to be impactful in the overall AI adoption, and how these agentic AI models like Google Gemini 2.0 and other models will help with not only the content generation and insights, but also actually acting on those insights and performing the tasks. Real quickly on a couple of other topics, the RAG, we talked about this last year, retrieval augmented generation. So I'm seeing a couple of specialized areas in this. One is multi-model RAG, where you can use the RAG techniques for text, content, and also audio and video images to kind of make them work together for real world use cases. And the other one is called graph RAG, basically use the RAG techniques on the knowledge graphs because the graph data is already interconnected. So by using RAG techniques on top of that will make it even more powerful. And I think the last one I want to mention is the AI powered PCs. Again, AI is coming to everywhere, right? So especially in line with the local first architectures that we are seeing in other areas. How much computing can I do locally on the device, whether it's my smartphone or tablet or IoT device? So this AI is going to be powering the PCs going forward. We already are hearing about Apple Intelligence and other similar technologies. But yeah, other than that, AI, like you all mentioned, GitHub Copilot. So AI is going to be everywhere in the software development lifecycle as well. I had one use case where AI is multiple agents are used for code generation, document generation, and test case generation in a software development lifecycle. So it's only going to grow more next year and be even more kind of like a pair programmer, right? That's what we always talk about. How can AI be an architect, or how can AI be a programmer, or how can AI be a QA software engineer, right? So I think we're going to see more developments in those areas. So that's kind of what I'm seeing. Like, I don't know, Thomas, Shane, or Renato, you guys are seeing any other trends in AI space?
So I'm definitely seeing the different pace of adoption. As I mentioned right at the beginning, the organizations for whom software is now their core business, but they still think of themselves as not software companies, the banks, the financial institutions, and so forth. They're struggling with wanting to bring in, wanting the benefits, and really having to tackle the ethical challenges, the governance challenges, but overcoming those, recognizing those, the limited selection of tools that are available. So one organization, the AI tool they're allowed to use is Copilot. Nothing wrong with Copilot. There are 79,000 at least other alternates. But even in that sort of big space, there's a dozen that people should be looking at. And I think one of the risks in that is that they end up narrowing the options and not getting the real benefits.
I saw this in my company. did a very slow rollout of a pilot of GitHub Copilot. And they wanted those people to say, here, how do we use it? But we're not going to just let everyone go through it. And part of it, once they said everyone can use it, is you have to go through this training on here's what's actually happening. So everyone understood, what are you getting out of it? Things like the hallucinations. Like, you can't assume it's going to be correct. It's only as good as what you give. But if it doesn't know the answer, its job isn't to know the right answer. Its job is to predict the next word, predict the next code. So it's always going to do that, even if that's not the right thing. So you still have maybe even more oversight than if you had just doing a pull request review or review for someone else's code, right? We've now done Microsoft Copilot as the standard that the company gets to use. I think this is probably the one you're referring to. Like, everyone can use the generative AI tool to start doing all the things. And because we're mostly on the Microsoft stack, there's the integrations with SharePoint and OneDrive and all of that benefit. So there's reasons to stay like within the ecosystem. But again, every employee has to go through, just like our mandatory ethics training and compliance training. And if you deal with financial data, you have to go through this extra training. If you're going to use the AI tools, here's what you need to know about them. Here's how you're safe about that. And I think that training is going to have to evolve a lot year to year to year, because the AI that we have in 2024 is not the same AI we're going to have in 2026. Like, it's going to be vastly different.
But I think it's a perfect segue from everyone talking about sort of AI. Renato, like our cloud space has lost its shine. We used to be doing all the innovative stuff, right? All the amazing things. And now we're the substrate powering all this amazing innovation going on in the AI space. So you mentioned already about the, sharp skew at reInvent as one example. There's many other conferences, but the sharp skew at reInvent towards this AI focus. But I'm kind of curious, what's going on outside of that, Renato? What are you seeing that's interesting in general from reInvent and from Cloudflare and from Azure and GCP?
I think that the key point that has been going on for already 2-3 years is that we have moved from really innovation, as in any area, to really a more evolutionary approach where we add new feature, but there's nothing really super new, and that's probably good. I mean, we're getting maybe more boring, but more enterprise-wise, maybe, but that's the direction. Just an example. I mean, you mentioned reInvent. People tend to go out of reInvent and say this has been the best reInvent ever, usually because they get more gadgets and whatever else. But that's that's usually the main goal, talking about sustainability. But even Amazon itself, during the keynotes and during the week before reInvent, was highlighting the 10th anniversary of AWS Lambda and 10 years of Amazon Aurora, 10 years of, what was the third one? I think container service, and then even, I think, KMS. And those were all announced 10 years ago at reInvent. If you take reInvent today, it was a great reInvent, but you don't have something as revolutionary as Lambda. You have cool things. You have a new distributed database. Yes, definitely, it's cool, but you don't have the same kind of new breaking the world things. It's more, evolutionary thing. As well in the AI space, that was, of course, a key part of it. But yes, there were some new foundational models for Bedrock. That's cool. They got better names that even someone like myself that is not that skilled in the area can say, I can get when I should use a light, a pro, or a micro model. At least I know that the price probably follows that. But apart from that, it's quite, I would say, evolutionary. Probably the only exception in this space is Cloudflare, at least the way I see it, because probably we used to consider just a CDN, we used to consider networking mostly, but actually in the last few years, they are fully fledged cloud provider with quite interesting services that have been out there at the moment. The other trend I wouldn't say is for 2025, but is already here already, is at least in the data space, in the database space, in the cloud database space, I think this was the year that Postgres became the de facto standard. Any implementation of any cloud provider has to be somehow even pretending to be Postgres.
Indeed.
That's the direction. Even Amazon doesn't mention anymore MySQL for new services, for DSQL or even limitless database earlier this year. Used to be their first open source compatible database reference point. Now it's not anymore. All the vector databases are pointing towards portals as well. So that's the direction I see at the moment.
Fantastic.
Quickly, Daniel, I have a comment. Renato, yeah, you are right, in saying that Postgres is getting a lot of attention. Postgres has a vector database extension called PG Vector, and that is being used a lot now to store the vector embeddings for AI programming. And also, the database are kind of becoming more distributed in terms of the architecture and also hosting. So I've been seeing a lot of databases that need to run on-prem and in the cloud with all the transactional support and the consistency support. And also, so distributed events are kind of helping in this. So definitely, like you said, just like cloud, is a substrate for everything else to happen. Database engineering, data engineering, and databases are the foundation for all of these powerful AI programs to work. So we don't want to lose focus on the data side of the things.
I'll cover the platform engineering aspects now. So for me, 2024 has definitely been the year of the portal. Backstage has been kicking around for a while. We had folks like Rody talking about that. And it's got its own Colo Day at QCon now, the Backstage Con. But I've also seen the likes of Port and Cortex emerging, lots of funding going into this space, and lots of innovation too. Folks are loving a UI, loving a portal, a service catalog, a way to understand all the services they've got in their enterprise and how these things knit together. Now, I've argued in a few of my talks, there's definitely a missing middle, which we're sort of labeling as platform orchestration popping up. And this is the missing middle between something like a UI or a CLI, portal, that kind of good stuff, and the infrastructure layer. Things like Terraform, Crossplane, Pulumi, cloud infrastructure in general. Now, I was super excited to see Keith Morris with his latest edition of his book, Infrastructure as Code, talking about this missing middle too, and also Camille Fournier and Ian Nolan in their platform engineering book that's just been published on O'Reilly. Fantastic read. Thoroughly recommend folks get hold of that. But they were also talking about this missing middle as well. So I'm super excited over the next year to see how that develops. And just in general, I'm seeing platform engineering move more into the mainstream. We're seeing more events pop up. I mean, the good folks at Humanitech spun up PlatformCon in 2022. That one is going from strength to strength. There's also Plat-Eng Day at QCon now, and QCon in London coming up next year. We're going to see even bigger Plat-Eng Day, I think, with 2 tracks. So I'm super excited about that. I'm definitely at QCon London. We're going to dive into platform engineering again. I've got a hat tip my good people that were on the track this year. Jessica, Gemma, Averin, Anna, and Andy did an amazing job talking about our platform engineering from their worlds. Topics like APIs came up, abstractions, automation. I often say the 3 A's of platform engineering, really important. And in particular, Averin Mordo talks about platform as a runtime. And at Wix, they built this pretty much serverless platform. And it was a real eye-opener seeing at the scale they're working at, how they've really thought about the platform APIs. They've really thought about the abstractions to expose to developers, and a whole bunch of the stuff behind the scenes is automated. Now, it's all trade-offs, right? But Averin, and I saw Andy say the same thing, they're optimizing for developer experience. And not just keeping people happy, but keeping people productive too. And there's lots of great research going on around developer experience. I got a hat tip the DX folks, Abby Noda and crew, and some great podcasts kicking off in that space. And I'm just really interested about that balance, that sort of business balance, I guess, with proving out value for the platform, but also making sure developers are enjoying their day-to-day work as well. There's a whole bunch of platform engineering FOMO that I see in my day-to-day job, and people spinning up platform engineering efforts, spinning up platforms without really having business goals associated with them, which I think is a danger, and I'll hint at some more where I think that's going later on. Now is that time where we hold you to predictions you are going to make, and next year, the InfoQ bonus is based on success or failure of these predictions. So I'd love to go around the room and just hear what you're most excited about for 2025 and predictions. And we'll go around the same order if that's all right. Thomas, we start with you.
Yeah. I don't think there's going to be some dramatic shift, like there's never dramatic shifts in architecture. But I think the sustainability, the green engineering, I think those concepts are just going to start becoming more mainstream. Like you look at how team topologies and microservices and all these things overlap, like all these books start referencing each other, the presentations start talking about each other in the same ideas in different ways. I think we're going to see architects that just look at it from, I did this for all of these benefits, and I learned to put all these benefits together because they were the right sustainable thing to do, and it made my system better. I want to see that presentation at QCon San Francisco next year of, we chose to do some architecture with sustainability in mind, and here's the benefits we saw from it. Shane?
I'm going to build on the people stuff. I think we're going to see challenges with the return to office mandates. I hope we're going to see some sensibility coming in that when we bring people together, we bring them together for the right reason, and that we get the benefit of those human beings in the same physical space doing collaborative work generates innovation. You want to allow that, but you also want to give the space for the work that is more effective when we are remote. So that combination of the two, and there's no one size fits all, and organizations shifting away from mandates to conversations. And let's treat our people as responsible, sensible adults and trust them to figure out what is going to be the best way of getting stuff done. I want to see the continuing evolution of the team areas, generative AI and other AI tools as partners. I think the agentic AI as a partner is going to be a huge potential, and I think we're going to start to see some good stuff happening in that space with the people. But again, the critical thinking, the human skills becoming more and more important. So what's the prediction there? It's maybe more of a hope.
No, I like it, Shane. Very positive. No, it's very, very good. Srini, on to you.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Yeah, definitely on the AI side, I can take a shot at a couple of predictions. I think the LLMs are going to become more business domain specific in a sense, just like we used to see banking standards or insurance industry standards. I think we will probably eventually start seeing some like finance, fintech LLM or manufacturing LLM, because I mean that's where the real value is, right? Because a typical ChatGPT program, only knows what's out in the internet. It doesn't know exactly what my business does, right? So, and I don't want to share my business information out to the outside world. But I think there will be some of these consortiums that will come together and share, at least non-sensitive proprietary information among the organizations, whether it's manufacturing or healthcare, and they will start to create some base language models that the applications in those companies can use to train, right? So it could be the large language model like Llama 2 will have something more specific on top of that, and then applications will be built on top of that. So that's one prediction for me. And the other one is agents. I think agents, and agents. Just like that movie Matrix.
I love
Agents
it.
are coming, right? Hopefully, these agents are not as nefarious.
Indeed.
They're not villains, right? So exactly. So, but yeah, I think we'll see more. I think it's the time for all these generative AI, great content to kind of put into action. Not by humans, but hopefully by computer programs. So that's another area that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing. Other than that, I think AI will become that, like you said, something like a boring, a cross-cutting concern that will just enable everything. We don't even have to think about it. And maybe just like the toys we buy sometimes, they say batteries not included. Maybe in the future, the applications that are not using AI, which will be very few, they will say this application does not include AI, right? So, so because everything else will be AI pretty much, right? So those are my couple of predictions.
I like it, really fantastic stuff. Renato, over to you.
Well, first of all, I will say that these are my tech predictions in the cloud for 2025 and beyond, as many good ones say. So I will always have the chance next year to say, well, there's still time. But I really think that next year will be the first year in the cloud space that for processor, Intel won't be the default anymore. Basically, we won't consider anymore using Graviton or anything else as the alternative will be the de facto default on most deployment. And the second one, giving as well how different cloud provider implemented now distributed database using their own proprietary network and basically taking advantage of the speed they have. I see the cloud provider going towards distributed system with less regional focus. As an end user, I will probably, as a developer, I won't care anymore long term about the specific region. The geographical area, probably yes, for compliance and many other reasons. But if behind my database is Ohio or Northern Virginia or whatever else, I will probably not care so much.
Thanks, Renato. I like the hedge there. Was it a smart move? Well done. So I'll do some predictions around the platform engineering space. And the good folks at Gartner are saying we're about to head into the trough of disillusionment in their model of adoption. And I also think this is true. My prediction next year is we're going to hear more failure stories around platforms, and ultimately that'll be triggered by a lack of business goals associated with the engineering going on. Now, I think this is just part of the way it goes, right? We saw it with microservices, we saw it with DevOps as well. Ultimately, I think it leads us to a better place. You go into the trough of disillusionment, you hopefully come out the other side on the plateau of productivity, and you're delivering business value, and it's all good stuff. And I think we're going to bake in a lot of learnings that we've sort of temporarily forgotten. This is, again, the way of the world, right? We often embrace a new technology, embrace a new practice, and we sort of temporarily forget the things we've learned before. And I'm seeing in platform engineering definitely a lack of focus on business goals, but also a lack of focus on good architecture practices. Things like coupling and cohesion, and in particular, creating appropriate abstractions for developers to get their work done, and also composability of the platform. So I think in 2025, we're going to see a lot more around golden paths and golden bricks, and making it easy to do the right thing to, code, ship, run for developers, deliver business value, and also allow them to compose the appropriate workflow for them. And again, that'll be dependent on the organization they're working on, but I'm super excited to see where platform engineering is going in 2025. As always, it's a pleasure. We could talk all day, all night, I'm sure here, but it's fantastic just to get an hour of everyone's time just to review all these things as we close up the year. I'll say thank you so much for everyone, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. And have a happy new year.